In the summer of 1324, a single traveler arrived in Cairo and, without meaning to, wrecked its economy. He brought no army to the gates. He laid siege to nothing. He simply gave away gold, so much of it, so freely, that the price of the metal collapsed across Egypt and did not recover for the better part of a decade. The man's name was Musa, and by the time he passed through, he may have been the wealthiest human being who ever lived. This is the story of a fortune so vast that generosity itself became a disaster, and of an empire the world was once too dazzled to ignore and later too forgetful to remember. How a king from the edge of West Africa became a legend on European maps he never saw, and why the richest man in history is someone we can barely measure at all. To understand the man, you first have to understand the ground beneath him. In the 14th century, the Empire of Mali stretched across the western rim of Africa, a vast belt of grassland and river country, roughly the scale of Western Europe, threaded by the Great Bend of the Niger. Its wealth was no accident. Mali sat astride two of the most valuable things in the medieval world, and it controlled the roads that ran between them. To the south lay the goldfields, the alluvial deposits where gold was washed from riverbeds and dug from shallow pits. To the north, across the Sahara, lay something almost as precious: salt, cut in heavy slabs from desert mines, worth in some markets close to its weight in gold. Mali stood in the middle of the exchange. Every caravan that crossed the sand, every measure of gold that moved toward the Mediterranean, passed through land the emperor taxed. The result was a treasury that behaved less like a kingdom's accounts and more like a force of nature. The Arab writers who heard of it struggled for words. Gold, some of them said, grew in Mali the way plants grow elsewhere. It was an exaggeration, but not a wild one. And around the year 1312, this engine of wealth passed into the hands of one man, who would soon do something with it the world had never witnessed. His title was Mansa Musa, Mansa meaning king or emperor in the Mandinka tongue. How he came to the throne is one of the stranger tales attached to his name. According to accounts written down years later, Musa claimed his predecessor had sailed west into the Atlantic with a great fleet, determined to find the far shore of the ocean, and had never come back. Whether any such voyage happened, no one can prove. What is certain is that the crown came to Musa, and the fortune came with it. Under his rule, the empire reached its height. It gathered dozens of cities and a patchwork of conquered lands, reaching from the Atlantic coast deep into the interior. Its armies ran to the tens of thousands. Its trade carried gold north to Cairo, to Tripoli, and onward to the courts of Europe, though almost no one in Europe yet knew where that gold was born. But Musa was more than a merchant king counting his revenue. He was a devout Muslim, and in the Islamic world, a believer of means is called to make the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca, at least once in his life. Musa resolved to go. The only question was how a man that wealthy crosses 2,000 miles of desert to pray. His answer would echo for centuries. He did not travel lightly. The chroniclers who described the pilgrimage, most of them writing in Cairo in the years after it had passed, reached for numbers that strain belief. They told of a column tens of thousands strong, soldiers, officials, servants, and enslaved attendants, some accounts placing the procession at 60,000. Ahead of the emperor, they said, walked hundreds of men, each bearing a staff of gold. Behind them came camels and horses without end, and dozens of beasts loaded with nothing but gold. Hold those figures loosely. Medieval chroniclers rarely counted and often multiplied, and the truth is likely smaller than the legend. But even the cautious version is staggering. This was not a man slipping off quietly to worship. This was a state on the move, a demonstration of power crossing the Sahara in the open, shedding wealth as it went. And Musa gave. In every town, to the poor at the roadside, to the officials who received him, he handed out gold. It was piety and politics and pride braided together. He was telling the world that Mali existed and that it was rich past reckoning. By the time the caravan neared the Nile, the word had already run ahead of it. Egypt had heard that a king of impossible wealth was coming. Egypt had no idea what that visit would cost. In July of 1324, Musa reached Cairo. It was then the greatest city in the Islamic world, the seat of the Mamluk Sultan, a metropolis certain it had already seen every kind of wealth. It had not seen this. There was a tense moment at the outset. The Sultan expected the visiting king to come to his court and bow, a gesture of submission the proud emperor was unwilling to make. Musa hesitated. In the end, by the accounts, he recast the bow as an act of devotion to God rather than to any man, and both rulers kept their honor. They traded lavish gifts. And then Musa did in Cairo what he had done all the way across the desert. He began to spend. He and his vast retinue poured gold into the markets of Cairo. They bought, they tipped, they gave alms on a scale the city simply could not absorb. Week after week, the gold kept coming. And here the story turns, because generosity at that scale is not a gift, it is a flood. Gold holds its worth because it is scarce. Pour enough of it into one place fast enough, and you break the scarcity itself. The price of gold in Cairo began to slip. Then it kept slipping. The metal that anchored the city's trade lost a real share of its value, and it stayed low. Anyone who held their wealth in gold watched it quietly shrink. The market that had thrown open its gates to the richest man alive was, in a true sense, poorer for having met him. Egyptian writers a full decade later still recalled it, the year the king from the south came through, and the price of gold had not climbed back since. And there is a last detail almost too perfect to be true. On the road home, Musa is said to have tried to mend the damage, borrowing gold back from the lenders of Cairo at steep rates to prop the price up again, spending himself into what may be the only debt a man that rich was ever recorded to owe. The wealthiest human being of his age had, through sheer open-handedness, engineered a collapse and then paid to undo it. When Musa finally came home, he returned neither empty-handed nor unchanged. From across the Islamic world he brought scholars, poets and builders. Among them, by tradition, was an architect who would help remake the empire's cities in brick and geometry. Musa turned his wealth towards something more lasting than a spectacle. In Timbuktu, a trading town near the Niger's edge, he raised mosques and schools, most famously the great Djingareba Mosque, built of mud, brick and timber and standing to this day. Timbuktu swelled into a center of learning, its libraries and teachers drawing students from across Africa and the Arab world. For a while, a remote town on the southern lip of the Sahara became a genuine capital of knowledge. But the pilgrimage had also done something far away that Musa never intended and likely never saw. The tale of the African king who scattered gold across Egypt drifted north into Europe. And roughly 50 years later, when a mapmaker on the island of Majorca drew one of the most famous maps of the medieval world, he set at its southern edge a crowned black king, enthroned, holding up a single nugget of gold. That was Musa. To Europe, he was proof that somewhere beyond the desert lay a land laden with gold, a rumor that would help pull explorers southward for generations. He had become a legend on a continent he never once set foot on. And then, as every fortune in these stories eventually does, it dimmed. Musa died sometime in the 1330s, the exact year, like so much of his life, uncertain. The throne passed to his heirs, and they were not him. Within a few generations, the empire he had carried to its peak began to crack. Quarrels over succession, revolts at the edges, rival powers pressing in. The trade routes shifted. New states rose to take Mali's place, and the gold that had made it began to run through other hands. The empire, once rich enough to unbalance the economy of Egypt, shrank into memory. And here is the strange final truth about the richest man who ever lived. We cannot actually count his fortune. There were no banks to audit him, no ledger of a national treasury, no way to fold gold dust and salt and land and an empire's worth of trade into a single number. The figures you may have heard, that he was worth some staggering sum in today's money, are guesses stacked on guesses. The honest answer is the more haunting one. Mansa Musa was not rich in the way we measure rich. He was rich in a way that broke the measurement itself. Rich enough that his kindness became a catastrophe, rich enough to turn into a myth, and still, in the end, a man the world allowed to slip toward the margins of its memory. Gold, and then ash. It is the oldest story there is. If you want more stories of the fortunes history built and then buried, stay with us. The stranger ones are still to come.